So, hello friends, very good morning to all of you. So friends, welcome back to Anthropology PYQ series. So let's try to decode every question and let's master every concept. So friends, as a part of our today's discussion, let us take up another important question and let's try to understand that particular question, right? So shall we proceed with the question? So first, the question of the day with us. So today we are on day 38. So now the question is, write short notes on the following in 150 words. So what is the question? So question is the taxonomic status of Ramapithecus in the light of Ramapithecus, Sivapithecus controversy. So there is a controversy regarding Ramapithecus and Sivapithecus. Now the question is all about, in the light of that controversy, so what is the taxonomic position and phylogenetic status? So we need to establish that. So this is our chief demand of the question. Is that clear? So now let's try to proceed further with the question and let's try to understand how we can address that particular question. So those who have joined in online, so you can just give indication that you have joined, and furthermore those who have attempted the question, you can just share the information also. So that's how. So let's begin the discussion of understanding what is Ramapithecus and what is Sivapithecus and what is the controversy between them and all such kind of aspects. Is that it clear? Now, first, if you see from the perspective of the anthropology, so the Ramapithecus and Sivapithecus, so both were used to be considered as the earliest ancestors of the humans. But as of now, there was a controversy that has begun with the recent findings and recent excavations. So Ramapithecus and Sivapithecus has been placed under separate genus Ponge, so where they have been found as the modern ancestors of the modern orangutan. So that was the recent finding. So now let's try to understand how and what was the developments that have happened in this realm. Is that it clear? Now friends, first let's try to understand it from the perspective of its evolution and how it has been found. So now, first if you see from the perspective of Ramapithecus. So Ramapithecus, when we talk, so what was the earliest things means, so Ramapithecus. So roughly in and around the year 1930s, so say 1932, there was a scholar known as Lewis. So G.E. Lewis has systematically was going with his excavatory works. So there accidentally he found some of the fragments of the mandible and some of the fragments of the relatives of the skull. So in 1932, G.E. Lewis, actually he found some fossil evidences of Ramapithecus at the Shivalik Hills. Shivalik Hills along the India. So along the foothills of India. So there, as it has been found in India, so he accidentally found it and he named these kind of the evidences that he found as Ramapithecus. Rama from the traditional mythical prince of India. So that's where it has been begun. So then these findings have been extensively studied by another important scholar known as Elwin Simons. So Elwin Simons has systematically studied this particular things. So Elwin Simons was another scholar, so who extensively studied about this. Extensively studied, and together both of them in a way they pitched that Ramapithecus is an ancestor of humans. An ancestor of humans. So why they have mentioned like this means, so they found some of the basic findings. So the basic findings were correlative of the humans. So first, what findings they saw? So the findings were, simply to say, first finding was there was thick enamel on the teeth. So enamel is nothing but the topmost layer that is present on the teeth, so which helps in protection from the sensitivity and all those things. So that's one important finding that they found. Then apart from this, they also found another feature, that the reduced canines. So actually in human beings we can see reduced canines. So that's another important aspect. There, furthermore, they found the dental arch was like similar to parabolic dental arch. Parabolic dental arc, it was there. So this was another important finding. So they found it. Then furthermore, there was a kind of absence of diastema. So this was another important thing. So what is diastema? Can anyone text? Absence of diastema. So diastema is basically nothing but it's the space, that's the gap between that is present between the two incisors. So front teeth, upper front teeth, there would be a gap. So that is known as diastema. So they found that there is diastema is also absent. So that's how. So when they observed this, so what they have got? So they have got the fragmentary parts of jaws and teeth. So all the findings related to jaw and teeth were like this. Now all of these findings were correlating with the humans. So that's how they said that these for the fossil evidences that we have got could be the probable ancestor of the humans. So this is how the studies have went on. So later on, what has happened? Later on, so when we see, so there were further findings. So even in the year 1962, so there were another species, another findings also were found in similar species were also found in Kenya. So they were known as Kenyapithecus. Kenyapithecus. So this was one another thing. So G.E. Pilgrim was another important scholar. So G.E. Pilgrim found these kind of things. So that is in 1962. So they classified that, they believed that, so these findings, that is Ramapithecus as well as Kenyapithecus, could be the possible ancestor of the humans. So that's how they came to one conclusion. But later on, when there were some other findings that were happening, so many other scholars also will do. So as a part of that, so what has happened in 1960s and 1970s particularly, scholars like David Pilbeam, so another important scholar. So David Pilbeam, he was excavating and he found one peculiar skull of the Sivapithecus, so where he named it as Sivapithecus, along the foothills of the Shivalik hills in Pakistan. So there he systematically found lot of features that are similar to the modern orangutans. So that's where the debate started. Now Sivapithecus, when we talk from the perspective of Sivapithecus, so the Sivapithecus has been discovered in 1982 with evidences by David Pilbeam, so another scholar. So where did he found it? Along the Shivalik hills, along the Shivalik hills of Pakistan. So this was one thing. Pakistan. So there, what has happened? So these for this fossils, so he named it as Sivapithecus. And why he, after naming it, so he said he could able to draw some of such kind of similarities with that of modern day orangutans. So that's how. So what he has done, this skull findings were similar to modern orangutans. So there he announced it as it could be the possible ancestor of modern day orangutan. So this was one important development that has happened. Now, what has happened? So this has been systematically established in 1982. So that means by 1970s, 1976 around, so some of the findings we have got. But still in 1982, after 50 years of the finding of Ramapithecus, so this development has happened. Now, what further has happened means further excavations, they led to some other reinventions. So this reinventions, what it revealed means, so whatever the findings that were found in the Ramapithecus, so they were not a separate genus, rather Ramapithecus is a subspecies under Sivapithecus. So this was another debate that arose. So with these findings of David Pilbeam, so now they revealed that Ramapithecus is basically a female version of Sivapithecus. So from here onwards, so what has happened means, so the Ramapithecus and Sivapithecus controversy started. Ramapithecus, Sivapithecus controversy started. So then the later scholars, so roughly in 1990s and 2000s, so many scholars further held and further they have came to a conclusion stating that so Ramapithecus is not a separate genus and Ramapithecus is not a direct ancestor of the humans, rather Ramapithecus is a subspecies under Sivapithecus and it's the female version of it. So there were some other differentiating things. So with that differentiating things, they concluded that so Sivapithecus is the ancestor of the Ramapithecus and Sivapithecus were the ancestors of the modern day orangutan. So what findings? So what shifted the perspective and what were the initial interpretations and what were the recent interpretations? So let's try to look at that. So when we see from the initial interpretations, so what were the initial interpretations? So let's see them. So initially when we see the initial interpretations were like this. Initial interpretations. So their first initial interpretation, it was with respect to the type of the dental arch. So dental arch was parabolic and it was believed that it was like human-like. So human-like parabolic dental arch. Parabolic dental arch. So this was one first finding. So parabolic dental arch means, so it was like this. So this was believed that, so dental arch was like this. So where we can see the teeth here. So then furthermore, next finding. So when they have observed the canines, so canines in apes were very elongated and they were long. Now canines were reduced and small canines have found. So that was the initial interpretation. Small and reduced canines. This was another important finding. So furthermore, what they have done, so there was a kind of thick deposition of the enamel on the teeth. So thick enamel, so enamel thickness was very more. So thick enamel. So indicating human-like feature. So this was another important finding. Furthermore, when they say, so they infer that it is like ancestor of humans. So ancestor of modern humans or humans. That means hominins. So this was the early interpretations that they have given. Later on, what has happened? So later on, the perspectives has been changed because of various further interventions and further discoveries. So the revised interpretations, what were the revised interpretations? So they have been changed. So now let's have a look into the revised interpretations. When we look from the revised interpretations, so from 1980s onwards, this revised interpretations has been started. So where first and foremost thing, when we see, what about the dental arch? So dental arch has been systematically reinterpreted that, so it is like mostly ape-like U-shaped dental arch that has been found. So that's the first finding. So ape-like U-shaped dental arch. This has been found. So that means U-shaped dental arch. So this was something that was there. So this is where one important change we have got. So for in apes we can see U-shaped dental arch. So that's where one systematic finding, differentiating finding, reinterpretation. Then what about the canines? So actually what was the finding that was there? So there was a kind of sexual dimorphism in the Ramapithecus and Sivapithecus, where the female version has had smaller canines and the male versions has had the larger or bigger canines. Is that it clear? So this is where, so what happened means, so Ramapithecus, which is considered as the female version. So female version had small canines. So this was one thing. Whereas Sivapithecus, which is considered as the male version, so it has male version has larger canines. So this is how they told that there was a kind of sexual dimorphism. There was a kind of sexual dimorphism, and it's not something that, so Ramapithecus has some different genus species. So that was another important finding. We have got it. So then furthermore, when they see, they looked at the enamel. So in apes also, some of the apes possessed thick enamel, because if they were to just crack the nuts and eat the nuts, kind of hard foods when they want to take, so that was one thing. So this thick enamel was also present in Ramapithecus and orangutans for tough foods like nuts and seeds. So this was another important finding. So thick enamel found in orangutans also. Why? To crack the nuts and to crack the seeds, which are tough. So that is another important aspect. Then at the finally, so what was the face and what was the other aspects? So concave face with narrow interorbital space. So this was another finding. So face was concave face with narrow interorbital space. That means eyes, so with narrow eyes. So that was one another thing. So these features were mostly, they were similar to the orangutans. So that's where, so they have finally revealed or reinterpreted that. So it is the ancestor of modern orangutans. And as of now, so this perspective has been changed. So this is how things have been developed. So here what you have to develop, you have to remember is that, so basic findings, so what were there. Now this species. So be it could be Ramapithecus or Sivapithecus. Both of them belongs to Miocene epoch. Belongs to Miocene epoch. So probably a period of 12 plus or minus 2 million years ago period. So probably they have survived during this particular period. So this is another important finding that you must and should remember and understand. So that's the basic aspects about the Ramapithecus and Sivapithecus controversy. So finally what they concluded is that Ramapithecus is not a complete new genus or separate genus. Now they have considered it as a female version or female variant of the Sivapithecus. So both have been placed under the family Hominidae, under the subfamily Ponginae. So that's the recent update. So that's how they have been reshaped, reinterpreted, and they have been placed. So now both of them belongs to Ponginae family, so where they are regarded as the modern ancestors of the modern day orangutan. So this is the debate and this is the controversy and that's the findings. Right friends, so where you have to remember, so some of the important scholars. So first scholar you have to remember is G.E. Lewis. So then we have Pilbeam. So Pilbeam was another important scholar who is concerned with the development of or discovery of the Sivapithecus and its correlation with orangutan. So then even Robert Leakey, so he found some of the findings in 1961 in Kenya. So 1961, so where he named it as Kenyapithecus. So that's another important aspect. So then we have Elwin Simons. Elwin Simons was one another important scholar who systematically and extensively studied about the Ramapithecus after its discovery. So this discovery and this controversy actually highlighted and demonstrated a long-standing debate in the paleoanthropology. So that is debate between Ramapithecus and Sivapithecus controversy. Now that has been cleared and now it is being understood in a systematic fashion like this. So this is what about this particular question. So you have to simply establish and you have to bring in, so what was the earlier interpretations and the revised interpretations, and you should give a basic conclusion to the topic where you can say that, so this represents a kind of landmark episode and the landmark episode in the paleoanthropology, that is Sivapithecus and Ramapithecus controversy. It's a landmark episode in the paleoanthropology which has been cleared in recent times and now it has been reinterpreted perfectly as the modern day orangutan's ancestors. So that's all about this particular question. So any further doubts in this particular section or particular question? So if there is anything, you can just text it. Right friends, so that's all with respect to today's discussion. Let's try to take up another important question and let's try to learn it in a systematic fashion. So is that clear? So on that note, let's try to wind off today's discussion. Let's meet tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. and let's discuss another important question. Thank you all for joining me for this session. So have a nice day.